Howdy folks, give me a second here. Some weird noises going on here. Okay, check my monitor. Alright, so I'm going to kind of play for a little bit. If you guys come in, for some reason it's not telling me what's going on here. And there's any weirdness with the sound, let me know. I'm doing the Fractal FM3 into the mixer. I'm using a different sound. This is, I guess it's like supposed to be like a 2-rock kind of thing, like Dumbly kind of deal sound today. A little boxy, but that's kind of the deal. When you come in, please say hello. Let me know who's here. I see a couple folks are on. As usual, I'm open to questions. We're going to talk a little bit about what we did yesterday, which was about scales in the circle of fourths, just in small chunks, to get you to see the fretboard all over the place. But we're going to do dominant sounds today, which is a Mixolydian sound that you can use for blues and for rock and funk. Like, so I'm playing just over an A7 chord right now. Also, let me know about the backing track. I'm playing the backing track out of the same computer I'm streaming from. Sometimes there's sync issues, so if it seems like I'm consistently out of time, let me know, because I may just have to play it out of the Bluetooth speaker. How's the sound, Ursula? Man, it's one of those mornings. So this is actually the backing track that I'm playing through here. It's one of the ones off the channel. It's just an A7 chord. We'll probably end up using, I've got 3 of these that are just dominant chords. I never know how I can respond in the stream through my app. I can put it in the stream here on YouTube. Let me just check to see if so we're broadcasting on the Twitter. Nice. And then Facebook on there. All right. So I'm just gonna play for another second, and then we'll get down to the lesson. We're going to turn that off for a minute. Let's talk lesson stuff. We've been on about 5-6 minutes. Like I was saying, I was playing through the Fractal FM3. I'm assuming this is a 2-rock sound. What I am going to do though is use just my deluxe reverb. Super dry, but that way you can hear everything. That's the tone selection for the day. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what a dominant or a Mixolydian chord is, because it's kind of important. Because when I was a kid, one of the first things that I did, one of the first major mistakes I did, was that I didn't really realize that when I saw the words major 7 or just 7 on a chord chart, that those meant different things. All right, I actually embarrassed myself greatly with a visiting clinician in our jazz band because I was playing the wrong chord qualities all the way through a Count Basie song. I'd only been playing for a little while and I didn't really know much, but still, it's still very embarrassing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, here we go. Okay, I was playing sheet music. So this is where we're at here. We talked in previous lessons here that if we start on C, and if you don't read music, that's okay. You have to take my word for this. If we start on C natural and go all the way up, all of the notes to C again. And these are the note names: C, D. Oops. Actually, let me do this in a different color. Then back to C again. We get a major scale, right? So you just start. We start on a white key on the piano, and C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And as you hear that, right? Actually, I mean, you've heard it a million times. It's a very normal sound to you because it's the majority of the melodies or the basis for a lot of the harmony that you've been listening to if you've grown up in a Western culture in the last couple hundred years. All right, your ear is able to predict where we're going to end up resolution-wise because you know that scale sound. Right, this is kind of the first thing that confuses people because a Mixolydian scale, right, there's a couple ways of looking at it. One of them is that it's basically just the major scale but with the 7th note lowered. So instead of having the half steps between the 3rd and 4th notes, the E and F, and the 7th and 8th notes, it's between 3 and 4 and then the 6th and 7th note, which doesn't resolve quite the same way. Right? The reason for that harmony we're not going to get too much into. All right, so that's kind of the first thing, is this idea that we're going to make the 7th note, which is B flat. Let's go 1, 2. All right, and that's the sound. Like if we're going. That's the sound right there. Right? It's not. If I was to play a 7th note, a 7th chord, we get that sound, which is very pretty, not very bluesy. Right? We're not going to get into functional harmony quite so much. The idea that a dominant chord, usually if you're playing in a major key, 5 chord and it exists to resolve to the 1 chord. That's not really what we're doing. We're not talking about that, other than the fact that that's normally what would happen. But when you're playing a lot of pop music, blues music, funk music, rock music, what happens is that 7th chord doesn't function the same way, right? We have a lot of like 1 chord amps where you're sitting on the in this case a C7 chord, or if you're playing blues, all the chords might be dominant. Right, which gives us kind of some other things to think about when you're soloing, because then you just can't play a major scale over that. It's not going to work. All right, so all we're doing today is we're going to talk about the layout of those little Mixolydian scales, dominant 7 arpeggios, and then some ways to actually take these not only in the circle of fourths, but just all over the fretboard. Take a simple idea. And be able to play it anywhere you want to on the fretboard, right? That's the big thing, because you have this giant 6 strings usually, 22 frets typically, but only 12 actual pitches. So there's a lot of repetition on the fretboard. And when we learn a lick, right, it's good for one key in one place if you learn it by rote or physically. What we're going to do is we're actually going to just learn what those notes are relative to the root, kind of like we did yesterday, and then how they lay out all over the fretboard. Right? So if you're playing over something that's kind of a simple harmony, you can take any idea that you know and play it anywhere on the fretboard. And it's not only for that, but also, if I'm playing an idea, right, I'm actually able to take that idea and develop it across multiple octaves, or play it all over the fretboard. Or I can say, hey, you know what? I'm playing bluegrass, right? And that's where it sounds good there. But hey, I'm playing jazz or blues. It sounds better in this part of the fretboard, right? Timbrally, it works better there, right? You want to have the ability to play anything, anywhere, and also appropriately for the setting that you're in, whether it's stylistically or just the sonic nature of things. So we'll talk more about that later. So that's the first thing, right? So this is a Mixolydian scale. All right. If you were to start on the 5th note of a major scale, in this case G, if we're doing C major, if we started on G and just went up all the notes in C major, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we'd actually get that same arrangement of half steps and whole steps. The Mixolydian scale is actually the 5th mode of a major scale. So when we talk about modes, that's how it's related to a major scale. It's basically a major scale started on the 5th note, using that 5th note as its new kind of key set. Right? But in this case, we don't want to be using it for resolution. We're just playing over this dominant chord sound. Now, so those are the two things: 5th mode of a major scale, or just kind of its own scale sound in and of itself. Now, last lesson we just talked about triads. When we talked about scales, we didn't talk about the fact that if you're in a major scale, right, the root, 3rd, 5th are the major triad, but also the 7th note of that scale gives you the first chord. That's that 1 chord. Right. As you go through a major key, if you were just to use the notes in that major key, you'd get a bunch of different 7th chords. Starting on the 2nd note, you would get a minor 7, 3rd note minor 7. The 4th note would be another major 7. The 5th note would be a dominant 7th chord, right? Which makes sense because the 5th mode of that major scale is Mixolydian, it's dominant. The 6th note is a minor scale, natural minor. 7th, I'll do it down here, is half diminished. It's the only kind of diminished sound there, right? And then you're back to the 1 chord, right? But in this case, we're going to extract not just the major triad from this, but we're also going to pay attention to the fact that the 7th note of this actually is real important to this sound. And in this case, I'll make this purple. It's going to be B flat. So I'm going to pause just for a second. There's just a couple of you guys on here. Do you have any questions so far? I think I should probably tune while we're taking a break. It's nothing like taking your guitars out of the house, which is one temperature, and then bring them up to the garage, which is 20 and 25 degrees colder. They tend to not like that. Still getting used to the tuner on the Fractal here. I've been using, what do you call it? Sonic Research turbo tuners for the last decade or so on my live pedal boards, and I really like them. They're very accurate, but I don't have one set up here. In tune enough. All right. Okay, so let's start building these on fretboards. Oops. So I'll put my guitar down just for a second. Let's get rid of that. All right, so just like we did yesterday, we're going to start in C. We're going to learn these in the circle of fourths to give you a practice tool. So root. Oops. And it's going to look very much, like I said, like your major scale. 3, 4, 5, 6. And the root's here, but instead of the 7 being here, we're actually going to make it a minor 7. So that note is a little bit different. All right, that's the one that actually is the difference between the major and the minor scale. Okay, so I'm going to kind of go through these in that in the circle of fourths pattern. Not that you're going to have to use them like this all the time. It's just this is the organization. Root 2, 3, 5, 6, minor 7, root, root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, minor 7, root, and then am I doing these just all? Okay, I know where I'm doing this. All right, so then we'll do the E shape here, or the A shape. Root. All right, so that's the first batch of these. I'm going to number them like I did yesterday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, and then in order to kind of do this all in one sheet, and honestly, you know, if you're doing this at home, I'll do this here in F. Root, actually, do some purple. Root 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, minor 7 is the root. All right. That makes that the sixth one right there. Okay, so there's our batch of Mixolydian scales, just in 1 octaves. All right. If you remember from yesterday, we're doing them in 1 octave just so you can kind of see things across the fretboard. If we were to, whoops, there we go. Learn them as big, like 2 and 3 octave scales, it'd be a little, it's a lot of information taken. That's kind of what we always do. So this is kind of an alternative to that idea that we have to learn everything as big scale patterns. All right, so the first one, all right, notice that if the root is on the far, if I'm looking at it as the far right side, if you're looking at it as the far left side. All right, and the bulk of the notes are below that on the fretboard. I'm going to start on my 4th finger. You can see with all of these, positions. That's kind of what's going on there. If the root is in the middle of the pattern, like if it's here, I always start on my second finger. And the other one I start on my first finger with these is just this last one that starts on the third string. All right. It really helps to organize even your fingerings with this stuff. Right? The idea being, if I know, it makes it a lot easier to actually move ideas around the fretboard because you got that physical component that's also going to be consistent. Right? If I'm playing in G, right, and I want to, right, I can play it in all those positions just by knowing where the roots are. All right, and then the other ones. This one, because of the way it sits on the fretboard, I'll usually start I'll do the scale on the fourth finger, but the arpeggio, I'll usually start on the third finger. So, right, it's just the consistency. The only one that's really weird is this one on the third string. So. I see we got new viewers. If you guys have questions, please feel free to ask. They don't necessarily have to be about this lesson. I got plenty of time today. If you have questions or if there's an issue with the stream, please let me know. Sometimes I get these weird sounds. I don't know if it's my streaming device or YouTube. All right, so that's the deal. All right, so within these, I can go through and use my highlighter and go root 3, 5, minor 7. We'll put the root in there too. All right, and basically what I'm doing is I'm extracting, like we did yesterday, the arpeggio out of each of these patterns. Now, being able to, it used to be like, I would be taught, here's this bit of information, which is the scale, and then here's this other bit of information, which is the arpeggio. And nobody really, there was always a lot of assumption in my early education here that I would see these things, right? But what I really like if I take this pattern right here, right, is that within that scale, right, we've made a point of seeing where those notes are in that arpeggio, right? So, or within the scale, where the arpeggio is within the scale. Right. So if I'm playing over something, let's bring back the A7 or backing track here. So I have to do it here. Right. I know where all of the resolution points to this are all the notes that sound good. Right. But I also know where all the notes that don't resolve are within that scale. So if I want to stay in the scale, make a question phrase and then resolve it. Right? It makes it really easy because I've actually got this grip of notes where it's all of the notes in the sound, right? And then it's the notes that are the sound, basically arpeggio, and then it's the other notes in the scale. Right? So, it used to be you learn a scale and then it's like you're kind of fiddling around looking for. I have students that still do this where they'll play and they'll listen until they find where the resolution point is, right? They don't really aim for things. Now, because we've actually got the scale, it kind of mapped out a little bit better, that in this position, those are the notes that will resolve the best, right? And then those are the notes that won't. So I'll go, right? It's easy for me to aim towards a point that's going to make sense. Right? Some notes are ambiguous, they'll work both ways. Right? The sixth right there. It's not so bad to sit on, even though it's not really a resolution point. And it's got chord tones on either side of it. The other thing also is that within this, and I'll go to the pattern I'm actually playing right now, is that anything that's not in that scale is also a viable note. You just don't want to sit on it, right? So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, minor 7, and then the root. That note's in between the 5 and the 6, right? If I just go, it's kind of ugly sounding. But if I just use it to walk through, not so bad. Right, I just walk from the 2 up to the 3. As long as you're starting and ending on chord tones, you can play pretty much anything you want. Right? I can play, if I wanted to, minor pentatonic scale, which is a sound. We know it works. Some of the notes in that minor pentatonic scale are also in the arpeggio, some are not, which is kind of what makes it weird. Right? But I can play, and as long as I end in one of these notes in the arpeggio, it brings it back in. I can play weird stuff. I can play minor pentatonic. I go up a half step. So literally I'm playing all the wrong notes, but as long as I resolve it, in key, out of key, in key, and then resolved to the arpeggio, suddenly I can play wacky stuff. Right, as long as I bring it back in, all is good. Nobody cares what you play while you're playing it until you resolve it. That's kind of one of the keys to doing this sort of thing. The resolution makes anything that you play before it make sense. If you don't resolve it, that's when it sounds bad. All right, if I go, all right, you'd probably go, yeah, not so good. All right, I'm just using that the A sharp or B flat. It's the flat 9. If I just sit on it, I'm a half step above the root. It does not sound good. But if I use it and resolve to the root, I'm in pretty good shape. All right, and that's a sound. Kind of Phrygian sounding. All right, there's a lot of different sounds you can do with that. I can even, one of my favorite things to do is just take that major triad and move it down a half step and then resolve it back in. Wrong chord, right chord. You even do it a half step higher, right? So that's A over the A7 chord, A sharp. And when I'm playing a solo, all right, I can go up the wrong chord and then back down the right one and I'm good. Right, so up the A flat, resolve on the A, up the A sharp, resolve on the A. All right, enough of that. So I'm going to pause for a minute. So a little bit about playing inside and outside and using this. Next thing we're going to do is the basically the exercise. Yesterday we had the circle of fourths. Oops. In what do you call it? Major triads. I have another backing track that is dominant 7th chords. Same kind of thing, another band in the box deal. I'll put this in the so that's what I'm playing through, and then if so you can kind of see as you're playing through what chord you're on. You to be able to think about each of these scale fragments independently anywhere and be able to switch from one to one. So if you kind of go through this exercise and you're actually able just to do this, I'll start at the beginning, all right, and I'll do them in the order of where the the scale patterns on the sheet are. So I'll start on pattern 1 here. Actually do this. You can start at the, you can even start down here, all right, and play through. I can crawl all the way up the fretboard. I'll do it without the music so I can do it quicker. C, F, B flat, E flat, A flat, B flat, G flat, B, E, A, D. Nope. Make sure I'm playing the right scale for you guys. G, there's C, F, B flat. So you can actually do the entire fretboard in the circle of fourths without stopping, just going to the next pattern up when you start C. And it's pretty fluid that way. So that's actually not a horrible exercise to do with this either. Right? We talked about that a little bit yesterday with the major scales. It's the same thing, right? So literally, you could take yesterday's lesson. And I'll put a link in the. There'll be 2 links. One of them will be in the video description if you're later, and then there's gonna be one in the comments on YouTube right now. Give me just a second. Actually, I'll give you 2. This is for the forum. This oops, I'm in the wrong place. Live lesson. All right. All right. So that is the thing I just put in there is the link for. That's weird. It's not updating. Let me do something real quick. Okay, so it's there. There'll be one in the video description below, but then also very strange. Okay, so what's happening here is that not all my stuff is updating. Hey, if you guys were commenting and I'm not getting back to you, I apologize. This for some reason is not very happy today. Okay, so here's the that there. Let me check on. All right. So hey, do me a favor. If you are watching this live, please let me know. Something funky is going on. I'm using this Restream app, and it's perhaps not doing what I wanted to do. All right. So you'll have the in the YouTube chat stream and also in the video description below this, there'll be something. There'll be links to the other lessons and other materials in case you didn't see those lessons and you are curious about something I talk about in this. There's also links to where you can get coffee mugs and if you want to support the channel, water bottles and shirts and whatever. Anyway, okay, so that's that. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the Mixolydian scale, the Mixolydian sound. One of the things that I like to do here, well, this is very weird. It's actually allowing me to access my desktop through Ustream. All right. Getting back on track. So we've talked about the circle of fourths. We've talked about the Mixolydian scale, the ways it exists. We've talked about the dominant 7 arpeggio. And then, you know, if I'm playing over something, the fact that we've got all of these patterns means we can spread this across the fretboard. However, you know, I did the whole thing G7. Right, so you can take any idea you know and move it around. So let's grab an idea here. Yesterday, I did this idea for you guys. Actually, we'll do this in. Well, I'll do it in G for right now. We're on root 5, and then I approached the 3 from a half step below, and then we played the root. And we did this in all the places we can do it, right? And one of the things you can do is you can take a lick like that and run it through with a backing track. B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. All right. That works over a dominant chord because of that little approach tone. Tomorrow we're going to talk about embellishing dominant chords. All right. Today we're not going to get quite so much into that because we're really talking just about the Mixolydian sound and the dominant 7. But if I wanted to take a real classic blues lick, right, and put it in any key anywhere on the fretboard, right, we can actually kind of go back to this right here. I'm going to add my fretboard here. All right, so that lick, if we're going to do it in, let me pull up a different backing track for you guys. Sorry. So we'll do it in A7. Alright, so we like blues, so we're going to do some blues here. Alright, the lick, root, I'm sliding into the 3rd from a half step below. So root, minor, 3, 3, 5, and then we're going to use the 6 instead of the 7. It'll get the idea across. And then the root. Right. So I can take that in any of these patterns here. Right. If I was to start, we'll do this in A. That's number 1. That's the 2nd pattern. 3rd pattern. 4th pattern. 5th pattern. 6th pattern. Right, so I can play. We didn't have that pattern, but anywhere. I've got it all over the place, right? So that's one thing, is we're using this to basically take one idea, put it anywhere on the fretboard. Right, so if I'm going, I really like starting an idea in one octave and then replying to it or answering it another one. All right, suddenly I've got a longer phrase because I've developed a simple idea. All right, you can take an idea. All right, so I played up. So root, 3, 5, 6, root, and then I went backwards to answer it. And embellish at that time. But that's kind of how I hear this stuff. Alright, go up. Go down. Alright, a little bit of pentatonic scale in there. Just mixing and matching. Dominant chords, most of these chord sounds can be kind of like a palate. That's why we're using a single chord right now. It's just that A7 sound. And over that A7, right, that Mixolydian scale by itself is pretty boring. Right? If I was just to play Mixolydian mode over this, so I'm playing all the right notes, right? It's a sound. Hard to play it unembellished. out ways of making it interesting, like I'll take triads from within the scale. Oh, let's start playing other stuff. All right, but that's Mixolydian. By itself, not very interesting, right? So then I like using the arpeggio as one sound, but embellishing, using chromatic approach tones. All right, that's kind of where I get a lot of those lines from. That's probably going to be tomorrow's lesson, to be honest with you. But then I can play other scales. We talked about minor pentatonic. All right. I can also play blues scale, which is minor pentatonic with one note added. Right. So any place I play. I can play the same scale sound, just a blues lick right there after the arpeggio lick. Right? I could play, instead of Mixolydian, if you remove the 4th and 7th notes, you get a major pentatonic scale. Alright, so that's a sound. If you want to sound kind of country, that's kind of the framework for that. Alright, you can actually take the blues note, when we play the blues scale like this, right? Between this note and this note here in the pattern, you got the flat 5. You do the same thing with the flat 3 here. Alright, that gives you the bluegrass, like the Doc Watson. Alright, so that's a great little lick right there. So you got major, minor pentatonic, major and minor blues scale. We'll call this major blues scale. I think that's what people call it. Is where you play the major pentatonic, but with the minor third between the second and third notes. Right. With Mixolydian, you can raise the 4th note. That is what we call Lydian dominant. That's actually a mode of the melodic minor scale. Where you get that flat 5 in there. Kind of modern sound. I like that one. Alright. You could play weird sounds. You could play, if you wanted to, a whole tone scale. Right? Whole tone scale is where every note is a whole step away from the other one. So there's no real key. There's really only 2 whole tone scales because every note is the root. Right? There's nothing that says this has to resolve anywhere. Right? But if you start on the root of the 7th chord and just play everything a whole step apart, it comes back to the root right there. Right? So you can play an idea. Yeah, and it just floats until you resolve it. You could even take it. Right, and kind of go through where it's not really resolving until you come back to the resolution, that kind of thing, which is good. So that's a whole tone scale. All right, you could play a diminished scale over this. That's a half whole diminished. Oops, the wrong one. Which means that if you wanted to, all right, I can play all kinds of weird stuff like that. You also have the they call it superlocrian, or they call it ultra dominant. It's another mode of the melodic minor scale. You can use triad pairs, so I can play the A triad, A major like this. Hey, look, we got Russian spammy guys. How do I not that. I don't have my ability to band. All right, but I can play A7 and G7, kind of a Steely Dan sound. Right, so that's a triad pair. Basically, we're just playing two triads that take you in the sound A, and then not too far outside, but not totally in, right? You could do weird triad pairs like the tritonal part. All right, so if I'm trying to play something. All right, that's kind of weird because basically it's A and then E flat major triads. I also like doing triads, major triads off of the diminished arpeggio. I think I learned that from an Oz Noise solo. It's kind of a different sound, but ultimately you get these weird sounds, and they sound great, or they sound weird until you land on your feet, which is kind of what we're shooting for. Okay, anybody have any questions? I need to check, make sure I don't have any porn bombing. Shoot, about there. All right. So tomorrow we're going to do chord tone embellishments. All right. A lot of the sounds I talked about, I didn't teach you, I just kind of showed you that they exist, partially because when I'm playing over a dominant chord, I've got a lot of options. I can do a lot of different things, which it's hard to make one chord sound interesting for a long period of time. And that's what we're trying to do. So we'll talk about the embellishments tomorrow. Let me find whatever's playing the backing track here. And then after that, we'll probably talk a little bit about structuring a solo over a dominant chord that's like a long vamp. Like sometimes you play like a tune, maybe just E7 for a long time, right? And it's hard, you know, even if you have a giant vocabulary, to keep that interesting. So what we can do maybe on Friday is kind of talk about solo strategies. And this will work for any kind of soloing, but especially if you're going to play over like a long funk vamp or something like that, or a long modal tune. These are things that'll kind of work for you. And then maybe next week we'll talk about Dorian modes. I think that might be in minor sounds. So, all right, so it's pretty close to being done. I don't have much going on since there's nobody really here live. I am going to pack it up, but please, if you have questions, you've got the links below. You've got the places to comment underneath the video. You can register for the forum and ask me questions there. And if not, I'll see you tomorrow. Remember, this is just kind of a one-week series of these. Partially, I'm just kind of workshopping lessons I'm going to be teaching in conservatory or working out things for new videos. But I thought it'd be kind of fun to give this a try. So this is it's all good. So if you have questions, please let me know, because it may actually help me refine these lessons later on for other students, answering your questions. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys go. Take care. Have a good Thursday or Wednesday.